Nothing will ruin your week like a bout of food poisoning, so here's a question. Are some restaurant menu choices more likely to have you running for the bathroom? Absolutely. So let's look at what you should skip when it comes to the foods most likely to make you sick. Jimmy John's made headlines when several people got sick from eating there in late 2017, and ultimately, the Illinois Department of Health determined the culprit was Sprouts. They were asked to stop serving them and eventually took them off the menu in all their locations nationwide. Do a little more digging and you'll find Sprouts, even those you might grow at home, are incredibly risky. According to foodsafety.gov, Sprouts have been responsible for as many as 30 outbreaks of food poisoning since 1996. Protocols were put in place in 1999 to try to regulate the safety of Sprouts that made it to market, but there's still no real solution to a problem that starts right from seed. Sprouts need to be grown in warm, damp conditions, and those are the same conditions that bacteria like Salmonella and E. coli thrive in. Since most sprouts are served raw or only lightly cooked, that means they're the perfect vehicle for delivering a serious bout of food poisoning. Turkey burgers might seem like a healthier alternative to a beef burger, but Consumer Reports issued a terrifying warning in 2013 after they did an extensive study of ground turkey samples. An overwhelming majority of samples, as much as 69%, tested positive for Enterococcus. That's bad, and even worse, only slightly fewer samples, 60%, were positive for E. coli. It gets even worse for turkey lovers too. The majority of the bacterial strains found in ground turkey were also resistant to the antibiotics typically used to treat them. That's in large part due to the prevalence of using antibiotics in farm-raised turkeys, and it also means that if you do get sick from eating ground turkey, it might take a long time and several different antibiotics before you find one that's actually going to help you get better. They also say there are no laws being broken here, and the USDA permits a certain amount of salmonella and other bacteria to be present in raw turkey samples. The rationale says that the bacteria will be cooked away, but if you want to be on the safe side, just give this one a miss.
Enough now, please!
Oh. Actually, it's very nice. It's delicious.
First, what are we talking about when we say warm water reef-dwelling fish? We're talking about fish that come from areas like the Mediterranean, Caribbean, and the Gulf of Mexico, and particularly carnivorous fish that live in coral reefs. Those are things like grouper, barracuda, sea bass, sturgeon, and moray eel. And you should avoid these because according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, these are the types of fish most likely to cause ciguatera poisoning. It's a huge deal, and it's caused by the presence of G. toxicus in coral reefs. They're first eaten by small fish, and as they move up the food chain, they become more and more concentrated until they finally get to the top, us. Around 50,000 people a year experience this terrifying type of food poisoning, with symptoms that include the usual gastrointestinal distress, but also fatigue and insomnia, weakness, acute sensitivity to hot and cold, and even a sensation some of your teeth are loose. Some of these neurological symptoms can last for years, so next time you're on vacation, skip the sea bass. In 2018, dozens of people from states all across the U.S. fell ill to food poisoning linked to romaine lettuce. The CDC issued regular updates and recommended people stay away from romaine until the outbreak was deemed to be over, particularly avoiding lettuce grown in Arizona. Unfortunately, food poisoning from leafy greens and raw vegetables is nothing new. Bill Marler is an attorney who specializes in food safety law, and when he talked to the Miami New Times about some of the dangers facing consumers in the 21st century, he pointed to leafy greens as one of the biggest. They're often exposed to bacteria in the growing and processing steps, but since they're not cooked, they don't go through what he calls a kill step. Marler says that the problem is compounded when you eat at a restaurant. While you might be careful about greens at home, restaurants typically use pre-washed or bagged greens. Any bit of bacteria still left on them will grow in the fridge, so he recommends skipping the salad and ordering a side of cooked veggies for a starter. There's not much on the menu that might seem like a healthier option than the fruit plate, but that fruit, and particularly cantaloupe, is high on the list of foods you should avoid. Between 1990 and 2012, at least 36 food poisoning outbreaks were traced back to cantaloupe. The Huffington Post took a look at why cantaloupe was so prolific when it came to the spread of bacteria, and there are a few things at work. Bacteria can pass through the cantaloupe's thick skin, and the rough texture of that skin traps it once it's there. They also grow on the ground, and that can put their strange skin in direct contact with bacteria-filled dirt and water, which sometimes contain animal waste-based fertilizers. That means there's a ton of potential for illness-causing bacteria to seep into melons, so it turns out that a fruit plate might not be so good for you after all.
They said that it was something that she ate, and that it was food poisoning.
It doesn't matter where you're eating or how clean and careful a restaurant is, opting for raw oysters is always going to put you at risk of food poisoning. That's because most oysters come from waters that are also home to a bacteria called Vibrio, and foodsafety.gov says it's very, very likely oysters are exposed. Around 80,000 people a year get sick from vibriosis, and an average of 100 people die from it, so it's definitely something you don't want to mess with. The CDC also says you can't see, smell, or taste contamination, and that it can happen any time of the year and in any temperature of water. Fully cooking oysters is the only way to make sure any of this potentially devastating bacteria is killed, and this stuff is no joke. While some people only get the typical symptoms of food poisoning, extreme cases can result in skin lesions and might even mean limb amputations. They also add that no, alcohol and lemon juice isn't going to kill Vibrio either, and seafood safety is just good common sense. Let's be honest here and admit that sometimes the cookie dough tastes better than the actual cookies. Eating it is something of a no-no though, and you've probably heard that's because of the eggs. There's another problem here that we talk about less, and it's also the reason you should skip truffles and other no-bake desserts that you might find on your favorite restaurant's menu. Those at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention say flour is just as problematic when it comes to potential dangers, and that's because it's essentially a raw agricultural product that hasn't been treated to remove any potentially harmful organisms. Bacteria like E. coli are known to make it into the flour during the growing or milling processes, and while they're killed during the cooking process, that means you should give desserts that haven't been baked a miss. That includes things like truffles and ice cream or milkshakes made with raw cookie dough, brownie batter, or cake mix. It's a sneaky, often overlooked source of food poisoning, but it's not uncommon. Sure, the best part of a buffet might be the carvery, but you might want to rethink asking someone to slice off a big hunk of roast beef for you. The CDC names large roasts as one of the most common sources for C. perfringens, a type of bacteria that causes somewhere around 1 million cases of food poisoning each and every year. Why roasts? There are a few reasons, and the first is that this particular type of bacteria prefers oxygen-free environments, like the middle of a giant hunk of meat. Because roasts are usually prepped and cooked in advance of a meal service, then kept warm before and during the meal, they're the perfect environment for this bacteria, which multiplies incredibly quickly. In high numbers, it can cause not just food poisoning, but complications like severe dehydration. Even those among us who can't look at a Big Mac without cringing might swing through the drive-thru at McDonald's for the occasional soft-serve ice cream cone, and it's no wonder why. They're delicious. But according to Public Health Insider, ice cream has been linked to numerous reports of food poisoning, and not just at McDonald's. In 2015, health experts were investigating a few cases of food poisoning that were ultimately linked to milkshakes served at the University of Washington Medical Center. Go back a few years and you'll find instances like a 2004 outbreak where more than 120 people got so severely sick that, according to NBC News, local law enforcement originally suspected there had been a bioterrorism incident. Some suffered kidney failure while others needed to be carried out of their homes to waiting ambulances. So what's going on here? There's a few things that make restaurant ice cream potentially dangerous, and that starts with the fact that some commercially produced ice creams still include raw eggs, which can contain salmonella. There's also a chance for contamination when ice cream melts a bit, and improperly cleaned utensils are used to prep the dessert dish. Improperly cleaned or even malfunctioning soft-serve machines are an even bigger risk. The health department involved in a massive McDonald's outbreak blamed it in part on a mechanical malfunction of the machine, which led to the contamination. It's no secret that some buffets can be pretty amazing. Where else can you get a plate full of shrimp and crab, topped with a pulled pork sandwich, some cornbread, and a hot dog? But here's the thing. Experts, like Johns Hopkins School of Medicine professor of infectious diseases Dr. Alison Agwu, say that because buffets are exposed to all kinds of people and their germs, it's pretty much science soup. Think of it this way. Buffets are usually the reason entire cruise ships become floating norovirus wards. So how is that a lot different than the buffet down the street? Agwu says there's a wide variety of invisible nastiness that can be lurking on buffets, and adds that salmonella, listeria, norovirus, adenovirus, and E. coli have all been linked to food poisoning outbreaks traced back to buffets. While she says that buffets can be brilliant when they're done right, she also says that rarely happens, in large part because of other customers that need to observe proper procedures to minimize cross-contamination, while not doing things like licking utensils and fingers before sticking them into communal food, and, of course, sneezing. People being people, Agwu adds, buffets can be a cesspool for bacteria and viruses.
Did you wash your hands with soap? Did you dry them?
The next time you hit the Chinese buffet or order from the local takeout restaurant, there's a good reason to think twice about the rice, and definitely think twice about the egg fried rice, especially if it's not prepared to order. Fried rice is so commonly a culprit in food poisoning cases that it's even given the name fried rice syndrome to the type of food poisoning caused by the bacteria Bacillus cereus. Live Science says that while most cases are mild, there are more than 63,000 of those cases each and every year, and most have been traced back to rice. The problem happens when rice is cooked and then left at improper temperatures. It only takes a few hours for the growth of illness-causing bacteria to start, and health experts warn that reheating rice doesn't kill the bacteria that's already started to grow. Additionally, since restaurants often prepare large quantities of rice for, say, an evening meal, there's a chance it's going to cool into the danger zone before it's served. Bottom line, not only should you not reheat that container of fried rice you only got halfway through last night, but you might want to skip the rice and make it at home instead. While it might seem like you're making a responsible choice when you pick water or iced tea with a slice of lemon over a sugary soda, there might be a massive catch. In 2019, published research from the University of Florida's Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences looked at just how likely salmonella was to survive on the surface of a lemon or lime that was then dunked in your drink or put on the side of a glass. They found that yes, lemons and limes contaminated by improper handling can definitely transfer bacteria into your drink and ultimately lead to a nasty case of food poisoning. Additionally, researchers also say that there's something else to consider here too. In many places, it's servers, waitstaff, and bartenders who are making the drinks, and unless they're really careful, there's a higher risk that they're going to be transferring some unwanted hitchhikers onto those garnishes. Unless they're washing their hands pretty faithfully, it's the nature of the job. It's perhaps the easiest decision you have to make every time you go out to eat. Getting a drink is pretty straightforward and standard, but it turns out that there might be something dangerous lurking in that drink. Specifically, it's on the ice. Deborah Huffman is a University of South Florida microbiologist who told NBC News that it isn't the ice itself, it's how many restaurants handle it. If you've ever seen a restaurant employee fill a glass of ice by just reaching in and scooping it with a cup or glass, you should know that's a big mistake that can transfer germs into the ice, and they can definitely survive to make it into your drink. Even if the proper scoop is used, there's still a danger. It comes from servers who might handle anything from money to other customers' used dishes and silverware before grabbing a scoop, getting some ice, then stowing it back in the ice. That's just a bacterial transfer waiting to happen too.
Almost everyone appreciates the best, and the bright tang of Coke is always welcome after a busy day of shopping.
You've heard of Staphylococcus, and it's actually normally found in about a quarter of perfectly healthy people and animals. And that's the problem. All those people and animals are carriers, and the CDC says they can contaminate food in the process of preparation. That's why deli sandwiches and wraps with sliced meats are on the list of things you should probably avoid when you're heading out to grab lunch at a restaurant. The CDC describes the perfect vehicle for staph as uncooked foods directly handled by people, and sliced meats are at the top of the list. There's no outward signs there's anything wrong with the food, and if you do happen to get it, antibiotics aren't going to help you. If you're still determined to get that fresh sliced deli sandwich, do yourself a favor and at least pass on the ham and other cold cuts with high sodium content. Staph thrives in salt-rich environments, and that makes sliced ham pretty much paradise.
There are plenty of core American values in New York, but there are not restaurants called Fatty Fat Sandwich Ranch. Turn here!
Everyone loves the idea of eating locally sourced food and supporting farmers right in your own neighborhood, and there's nothing wrong with that. But according to food safety attorney Bill Marler, hopping on the raw food trend bandwagon can be a risky endeavor, and ordering fresh, raw, and unpasteurized milk can lead to some major problems. He's seen dozens and dozens of people fall ill because of the bacteria not just in unpasteurized milk, but in raw fruit juice and cider too. He adds that even small organic farms can be the source for this kind of food poisoning, and according to British Columbia's HealthLink BC, there were around 1,700 cases of this kind of food poisoning reported in North America between 2000 and 2010. Juice from apples, oranges, lemons, pineapple, coconut, and bananas have all been culprits, and most instances involve children, E. coli, and salmonella. Contamination occurs when the juice is squeezed, and they say that refrigeration absolutely won't kill bacteria. Only pasteurization will, so go ahead and skip that raw juice option. Restaurants tend to be proud of their specially prepared sauces, seasonings, rubs, and dips. While you should absolutely opt in when it comes to things like signature barbecue sauce, you might want to rethink restaurant-made mayo. Australia's Good Food warns of the dangers and says it's played a fairly large part in the cases of salmonella they've seen in recent years. In 2015, one woman died after eating mayo prepared with raw eggs, and the Victorian Department of Health reported dozens and dozens of others have suffered from effects of severe food poisoning after eating mayo prepared in-house at a cafe using free-range eggs. Even though they say the country typically has a low incidence of salmonella-contaminated eggs, it might not be worth the risk. In 2017, the British and Irish food safety and nutritional awareness group Safe Food kicked off a campaign called Burger Fever, partially in response to the growing trend of restaurants selling boutique and gourmet burgers cooked rare or medium. They stressed the importance of not ordering a burger that's anything but well done, because undercooked burgers carry a higher risk of both salmonella and E. coli. They also address why rare burgers are way more likely to make you sick than, say, a steak, and it has to do with preparation. Bacteria start out only on the surface of the meat, so when you order a steak, they're seared off on the outside while the inside can stay pink. Burgers are minced though, and that spreads the bacteria throughout the patty. Any pink in the center means bacteria can still live there, and the only way to guarantee you're not going to get sick is to order a well-done burger and cut it in half to check it's cooked through before you dig in. Your stomach and your future self will thank you for it. Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more mashed videos about food safety are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.